Hi, welcome back to the podcast. Adrian here, and Renaud is with me. It's episode 219 today, and Renaud is going to be answering the question, when do you need design reviews on innovative hardware products? You're listening to China Manufacturing Decoded from the Sofeast Group.
Hey Adrian, how you doing? That's a big topic right here.
Yeah, yeah. Well, there's a number of things that you can get into, and it's not only the when. I think you're going to be explaining kind of a little bit about
Mm.
design reviews in and of themselves as well, of course, before we sort of get into the timescale of it. So it'll be
Mhm.
an introduction. Also, before we get started, though, recently, actually, you and I together in Paris, we went to the Viva Tech Expo for
Mm.
sort of software and hardware products. Lots of interesting things there.
Yeah, I mean, on the scale of, a European city where you can get there, it's much smaller than Las Vegas and the
Mm,
Consumer Electronics Show. But yeah, there's, you know, a number of interesting products there. So obviously we focus more on hardware products, not so much on software products.
mm,
But it's nice also to look at what these software guys are doing, because it kind of tends to converge at one point, right?
yeah.
And then yeah, some of the same people who were exhibiting at the CES were also exhibiting there,
Hmm.
especially French companies, some French startups that you know good to keep our finger on the pulse, basically, to know what's going on, what kind of new products tend to be popular, and so on. But yeah, it's much smaller than the CES, that's for sure.
Right.
Mm.
Well, anyway, that's I'm now back in front of the computer where I belong. Don't often get out, but I escaped and made it over to France. So let's crack on to this week's topic then. Design reviews. So if we
Mm.
kick off then, I suppose let's just introduce it first.
Sure. Well, whenever you start to work on something, and especially if it's like it's going to be a big project, you'd be nuts not to look for feedback from other perspectives, right? Especially people who've done that before, especially people who have a different perspective than you. So they're going to see, to look at what you're planning to do or what you're doing, um, with other risks and other implications in mind. And the logic is very simple. If when you're just planning your concept at a high level, you are about to make a mistake, maybe overlook something or whatever, and someone points it to you and you fix it, it can be fixed maybe in 2 minutes,
Hmm.
right? And the cost and the time it takes is very small often. Okay. If you do that, when you have like documented your requirements, same thing, maybe 5 minutes, just give another read at the whole thing and make sure it's still consistent and so on. Oh, maybe I changed this, and I also need to change that. Okay, maybe an hour, right? But usually not a lot of time.
Hmm.
Then once you have, I don't know, you've worked with an industrial designer, they have sketched out a few things and so on, and then you start to go down. "Oh, okay, I like this concept. Go a little bit more into the details in the sketch, and then they start to go into CAD, to use software to start to draw it. Well, and then you say, oh, wait, I overlooked something. There's some kind of issue here. I haven't thought about that. Oh, sorry, we need to fix that. Like this is too large, or this is too bulky, or whatever. Or this is going to be too heavy. We need to remove that, whatever, that leg of the product or something. Oh, well, right there, you just threw away, maybe a few days of work. Then once you had some design engineers work into the details of the product design, and maybe they've spent, I don't know, a month of time on it. And you tell them, oh, by the way, have you thought about this? Maybe the antenna is not going to work well because of this, whatever. There's some kind of metal enclosure or something. Or, oh, well, you might have wasted, 2 or 3 weeks of work because maybe they're going to have to go back and do some changes. Or maybe in the worst case, they have to scrap everything. Like, oh, we're going with the wrong, architecture because we did not think that, we needed that level of performance. Oh, we need Bluetooth to go, you know, if we up the power, we want it to go all the way to 600 meters away. Wow, okay, then we need to use the very latest, whatever, Arrowhead chip that use the new kind of Bluetooth, blah, 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 blah. We cannot use that chip that we used to. Oh, so suddenly they have to go back, they have to scrap the entire work, basically, start fresh from a new chipset, and then also maybe learn, how to work with that new chipset, etc., etc. So it might also completely throw away the plan for the new product design, right?
Mm.
Maybe the electronic and firmware side were supposed to take, I don't know, 2 months, and now suddenly, oh, maybe, well, we're not really sure, 4 or 5 months, maybe 6 months. Uh-huh. With a much higher level of risk, right? So you waited too long to surface an issue, and you have a lot of rework to do, right? And then, of course, the further down into the design process you are, the heavier the cost of these changes, right? It takes more time, takes more money, right?
Mm.
And if you do that, well, you have a fully functional product, et cetera, et cetera. And then, I don't know, you want to sell it to a major customer. And then just that time, you show it to them. And finally, the first time they see it. So basically it's a review, right? That's also a form of review is user testing, user feedback, right? And they
Oh
say,
yeah.
well, there's no way our people are going to use that. I mean, the display, it's not going to work. It's in bright daylight or something. This display is not bright enough. We just need 3 buttons. Well, it's that simple. And then you're like, oh, spend so much time and even money to get the display exactly the shape we wanted and so on, because that requires tooling, etc., etc. Oh, but you told us that you wanted it sleek and kind of like that other product. So, oh, yeah, but come on, this is going to be used in a construction site and, in broad daylight, like that. This doesn't work. So that also sometimes happens. And the worst is if you do that, you've already opened tooling. So I don't know. For example, you have a plastic enclosure, or maybe you have some internal parts. Okay, custom design. You custom design your gears and your mechanical mechanisms. Okay, and you have the tooling, you have everything, and then somebody tells you, yeah, but wait a minute, this is not going to work with this kind of plastic that you picked, and maybe the gears are a bit small or whatever, because it has to lift up to that many kilos. Oh, wow. And then you do the simulation and you've like, whoa, I completely messed up here. This is wrong dimensions and wrong polymer, like everything wrong. What do we do now? Well, in the worst case, you might have to scrap that piece of tooling. You
Yeah.
might scrap because not just one, right? Is the gear and all the different things that all work together. Maybe you throw away $50,000 of tooling.
Yeah, I
Not
was going
not
I
to
was going to say
mention,
that's
yeah,
not a few dollars. We're talking
oh yeah,
many thousands of dollars.
oh yeah. Plus all the design work that was done, maybe the simulations you did, or all the work you did. And again, it's not just dollars; it's also time. You need to redo that tooling. Well, the tooling supplier, the plastic supplier is going to look at you like, well, Are you sure this time? Do we give you the highest priority or what? Right?
Mm.
And then it's going to go into another full cycle, maybe 6 weeks, maybe 8 weeks. And then you get the whole thing trialed and approved and everything. And then you need to put together some samples to test again and so on and so forth. Exhausting,
Yeah.
exhausting, right? So that's the idea about design reviews. When you design a new product, it's a project. It's always a bit of a one of a kind project because it's the first time you design that kind of products, right? And maybe as a team, you already design, a dozen coffee machines. Okay, but this coffee machine is special. It's also going to grind the beans and it's also going to whatever. It's going to make the foam in a new way and blah blah blah. Blah. Okay, and the material outside is different. We're going to make it more fancy. So there's a lot of new parameters here. It's going to be a totally one of a kind project.
Mm.
So it's so easy to make a mistake. It's really not routine work, right? So that's really when you need to involve more people to look at the project, look at what you're planning to do, look what you've done, and yeah, review it, give you feedback, right?
Yeah, and this is something that we've said before. I mean, if you don't take the necessary precautions, I think we can use the word precaution in this case, before you start locking designs and making tooling and things like this, the chances
Mm.
after that of big problems, not only financially, as you mentioned with the tooling, but also in terms of your time. If you've got, customers who are waiting for the products and then you've got to tell them, oh no, we're going to be delayed by several months now,
Mm.
for example. All of these things, this is all bad. So yeah, this does make a lot of sense.
So different types of reviews are necessary at different stages of the new product
Mhm.
development, right? So if we start at the very beginning, you have someone who assumes the role of the product manager, let's say, and is going to document the requirements. Okay, what is this product supposed to do? What's the minimum amount of performance? um, Whatever. So if you want to design, I don't know, maybe let's say a desktop calculator, okay, something everybody can imagine. Well, you get to think, okay, what kind of mathematical functions, and would be with, probably with what buttons, do people really expect, and what's the size roughly that people expect, and the weight. And then you think, is it going to be on battery? Is it going to be solar? Um, how big the battery, or at least in terms of capacity or something. You need to start to translate that into engineering terms, right? Okay. Then do you just say, okay, Tone, I approve it myself, go? No. There's always a bit of a back and forth within the design teams, right? And people might say, well, um, why you do it in, I don't know, why you do it in PC, it might be exposed to the elements outside, the sun and so on, and
Mhm.
temperature variations and things like that. So if people use it outside and they leave it outside a bit, it's going to go bad, pretty fast. Oh, okay,
Yeah.
well, all right, let's do whatever, ABS or PC and ABS or something, right? So you get this little type of feedback, and it really makes the design, or at least the product requirements at that stage, because that's all you have. It's actually the inputs to the design, right? It's the inputs to the design process. At least you make sure that you're going to feed the right inputs into the design and development process. And already at that stage, people can often catch some risks, right? Typical thing is they will say, "Oh, we need this feature and this feature and this feature, etc." And then somebody asks, "Okay, but like, if I'm the typical user, now I change the perspective. What's this product even going to kind of look like, feel like? How, what do I need to do with this product? Oh, I need to pick it up and bring it to another place.
Mhm.
Okay, so the weight is important, right?" And people are like, Oh, yeah, right. It's not a stationary product. Yeah, I guess the weight is important. Okay, so what is the maximum weight that people would accept for this kind of product that does this kind of thing? Let's think about that. Let's think of equivalent products or whatever that, let's try ourselves and say, well, maybe the maximum is, 10 kilos or something, right? Oh, and it needs a handle. Is it going to roll? The blah, 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 blah. Okay, goes on and on and on. So you really want to fit the right inputs into design process. Otherwise, garbage in, garbage out.
Mm.
Um, no, you're not going to have very good results, right? Or you're going to have to do rework late into the process, and that's very painful. So typically, who can do that? Well, you need to talk to target users to really understand the way they work and the kind of issues they have, etc., that product would solve. Then you need to talk to different people from, with different perspectives again, right? So maybe design, how to say, designers, maybe some mechanical, maybe if there's electronic parts, maybe electronic firmware, um, maybe start to involve an industrial designer in there, things like that. And then maybe you might also want to pull in someone from manufacturing just a little bit. Say, hey, from your point of view, something that does all this, anything, and maybe I don't know, maybe even the logistics guy might say, oh, wait a minute, this is going to be sold e-commerce. So it needs to fit into a standard FedEx envelope, like here, right here. So you can measure, it's got to fit in this envelope. Otherwise, cost is going to be much higher. So now you design you do design for a lot of things, right? It's that DFX, right? Design for excellence, or design for many, many factors.
Which we've spoken about before on the podcast, actually quite a while ago, a good couple of years. So I'll leave the link to that.
Right, right. So of course you want to design for quality, for reliability, etc. Even design for logistics and things like that. Okay, that's sort of what we call phase one. Once you have that, you go into phase two, which is let's do a feasibility study on some of the high sources of risk to address that first. Maybe let's put together a rough proof of concept prototype, even if it's using, a like half of a competitor's product and with some cotton boxes around or whatever. Even if it's, programming an Arduino or a Raspberry Pi, anything, something that does the basic function of the product. Not all the functions, definitely not refined at that stage. But
Mm.
let's already confirm that if it works like this, then it will solve the problem. And then we see also what kind of issues we can expect. Okay. So when you do that, this is the beginning of the design process, right? You try different things. You start to put things together in a crude manner, fast, to get some quick feedback. And maybe you do, two, three, four different alternatives, possible designs. Okay. So at that stage, you are probably picking the architecture of the design. The high level, big decisions. Yeah, what I mentioned before, what chipset is really well adapted to the needs, things like that. If you mess up on the high level architecture later on, well, basically you have to go back to this stage. There's no shortcut here, right? Usually there's no shortcut. So you want to
Mm.
get that right. And that's when you want to pull in, maybe a very experienced design engineer who will ask some questions that make sense, look at what you've done, and possibly tell you that, hey, probably going down the wrong way. Maybe you should try that. Or maybe they would say, well, that might work, but you get to watch for certain such and such issues, right? Enormously value adding. Okay. And people don't do it often and usually for the wrong reasons. it's not a matter of budget because I see people spend a lot of money, on like lawyers preparing their protections and already preparing to file a patent and things like that, even though the product is not even a real product yet, hasn't hasn't even been designed and so on. So there might have to be some revisions to the patent anyway, and we don't even know if the product will even work in the marketplace. So in most cases, that really doesn't make any sense. And we talked about that before, I guess.
We did.
Um, yeah, yeah. But
Mhm.
we see people spend thousands of dollars on this and that for, I'm not picking on lawyers in particular. Already, I don't know, having, oh, this is the logo and the product name is going to be great, that's going to make all the difference. Yeah, sure. Not sure about that, man. So people spend a lot of money on these things, yeah, and yet they don't try to get their design reviewed by a high level engineer or two, right? So it's usually not an issue about related to the budget. It's more an issue of my product is confidential. My idea is confidential, and it's like $1 million idea, or maybe it's got a 50% chance of being that. Okay. So I need to be extremely careful, and I should not reveal it to anybody because there's a high risk that they will try to do it themselves, or they will tell their cousin who will do it themselves or something like that. And that doesn't make much sense, frankly. Um, Again, there's some experienced engineers who, especially if they're in their 50s, in their 60s, they don't want to go, set up a new company and do your product faster than you or something like that. I mean, come on. It just doesn't make much sense. But anyway, people read things in the news and they get scared, right? But I
Mm.
really, really encourage people to get proper design reviews done. So that was in what we call phase two, when you do your proof of concept, you do your feasibility studies, etc. Then you have your architecture, you have some answers to the big questions, the big challenges, and you kind of have a relatively clear idea about what you need to do. Okay, just get all the engineering design work done, get some prototypes, get the prototypes tested,
Mm.
etc., etc., all the way until you have a fully functional prototype that that is tested, approved, etc. So when you're in that stage, again, you're gonna have questions, problems come up, right? It's not linear. It's not a straightforward way. There's a lot of detours. Oh, this, but if I do like this, it doesn't work. So let me try to see if I can find an easy workaround. Otherwise, maybe I need to replace that entire module, blah blah blah, right? So what should I do? Okay, so you make decisions,
Mm.
and a different engineer might make different decisions. Okay, so here also at one point, very good to have a design review. Okay, now design reviews sometimes are relatively unstructured, just looking at it and telling you some comments, asking some questions, challenging you a little bit, etc. That's great. Sometimes they can be much much more formal, right? And there's a tool that we discussed before. I think it was with Andrew, maybe last year, the Design FMEA.
Hmm.
It's basically a structured approach to risk analysis. And you take your product and you say, okay, and this product is like this module and that module. Okay, it's like maybe, I don't know, the base and the top or something. And each module has several like functions, or usually it's broken down like that. And then you think, okay, so that part of the product with that function, what you know how could things go wrong, basically? How could it go wrong? What are the risks, right? And when you do that, you really need to have people again from different perspectives, right? So some design engineers from different specialties, but also maybe someone from quality, someone from manufacturing, right? And maybe someone more from the business side, just to look at it and ask questions and, what could go wrong? How could it go wrong? How bad would it be? Right? How likely is it to go wrong? These are the kind of questions that the template forces you to answer. And that is actually, it's a formal approach, a structured approach to a design review. And based on that, you have a sort of a priority list. Okay, this is by far the biggest source of risk because it's relatively likely to happen and it could really trigger big problems. So, for example, you have a product and you think, oh, it's going to be used like this. Maybe it's I don't know, it's some kind of garden tool. You say, oh, it's just going to be used to, I don't know, whatever, to cover the flowers or something. And then someone look at it and say, well, wait a minute. I look at the industrial design and this looks like, a toy. Look at the colors, look at the shape, look at this, you're going to leave it in the garden. You're going to have kids playing with it. Like for sure, it looks like a basketball, for example. Okay. Sure, you're going to have kids playing with it. And there's going to be misuse, right? You're going to misuse it. And what could happen? Well, it's not safe at all for a kid because whatever, if they put their head like this and then they could get trapped or something. Well, that right there is a huge source of risk, and you absolutely need to make sure that it's covered, right? You need to change the design, basically. Right? That's an example of something that typically that would come out in such a review, right? So this can get started from the beginning, but yeah, usually when the design starts to take shape, right? You start to do a workshop, and then from time to time you do a workshop, you keep adding to it, and you keep refining. Okay, this is my list of high concern, potential issues, and you keep adjusting the design based on that. That's sort of the proper way by the book to do it. Okay. You should also look for some very specific expertise. When you start to have functional prototypes that you can test, etc., well, you want to start to take into account feedback from manufacturers, and not just someone who has some experience about manufacturing, but you say, well, there's going to be this kind of surface, and we're going to put this kind of treatment. Maybe we're going to do I don't know, PVD plating or classic electroplating or something. Is that going to work? And, can it look like this? Yes or no? Well, then at a certain point, you really need to go to these specialty like surface treatment suppliers, and they can tell you basically based on their experience, what is the risk, how likely is it that it's gonna be okay. You also need to take that with a grain of salt because they might say, yeah, oh yeah, we can do it, but they don't really have an idea. They never did it exactly like that, right? So the best is if they can show you something that they've done exactly the same or pretty similar, then you have an idea. Okay. We talked also earlier in this podcast about design for reliability and design for manufacturing and assembly. Ideally, if you do things by the book, you would do this kind of design reviews as soon as you start to have to have some kind of design, even if it's just sketches or CAD, and then later on from time to time, right? Because, for example, reliability. If you say, well, very important that this product, keeps working, otherwise it might be a matter of life and death, etc., etc. Oh, okay. Then, for example, one question will be, what kind of redundancy can we have? Because it's going to rely on, I don't know, that sensor, for example, or that motor. And if it fails, well, that's it. The whole product is cooked. That's it. It's not going to work. And then
Mm,
you go into potentially catastrophic events, right? As a result. So if you look at the motor and you say, well, from historical data, it is 0.99% reliable. Okay. Well, just because of that, we already lose 1 percentage point for the entire product, or maybe 0.98, let's say. Okay. It's not bad, the the probability that it stops functioning within a certain period, right? Okay, but if we have two of them, and they are independent, meaning that it's not going to be the same event that leads to the failure of both of them at the same time, hopefully, then overall the failure rate of the entire product will be lower. The reliability level will be higher. So just think of an airplane. I know we talked about Boeing a few episodes ago, but it's not connected to any of their
mm,
shenanigans anyway.
mm,
Um, if you have two engines, okay, on a jet, and one of them fails, well, you've already taken off. The second one, if it's still, as long as it keeps working, should be sufficient to get you to, another airport, not very, very far away, maybe. Or maybe you might be able to make it all the way to your destination, maybe. Okay. That's the way it's planned. However, if, I don't know, you have a fire under the electronic bay, and then all of the electronics go out and everything is cooked, well, both, or maybe if all the tanks, the fuel tank, there's a leakage, and then like all the fuel runs out. Well, both engines anyway are going to be out, are going to fail. But if you have a big bird that goes into one engine, and then that engine no longer works, okay, you still have the other one. That's the idea, right? So more redundancy makes the whole thing more reliable, but you got to make sure that another failure somewhere else, is not very likely to impact all of your redundant elements. Otherwise, it's going to go out. So anyway,
mm,
that's just an example for design for reliability. When you do design for reliability, these kind of things, it's the architecture, it's the basic planning for the circuit. Okay, if you think of electrical engineering, after that, you keep doing a lot of work on it. If it's wrong, if you need to go back on it, then you're going to have to do some rework, right? So it should start earlier, but then it's also good to do it again later, because a reliability engineer will look at the product in its more evolved form and will think of other things, right? So it's not like done, done and over, right? And at one point you need to go into testing, except again, if you do airplanes, even though they still test the airplanes, but they do a heck of a lot of modeling first, because, well, putting an entire plane under certain stresses that might break it, it's very expensive to just produce one prototype, right? So they do as much modeling as they can. But if you work on some relatively simple devices, not very expensive, then much better to go into testing earlier to see what fails, and how many cycles, etc., how much stress is necessary to make it fail. That's part of this is usually not called a design review, it's more like a design validation. Okay. But the idea is that as you do the work of the design and development, you subject your whatever, your design files, your prototype, etc., for review, validation, verification, inspection, whatever is necessary to get some feedback. And it's a loop to make it better, right? To make the design better. And then, just to conclude, as you get to what you think is the end of your product design, well, you say, okay, it seems like everything is ready and everything, and maybe let's make some tooling, and then we can prep up for production. Well, one last review might be a good thing, right? One last review by the manufacturer. It's also good often to let the manufacturer put together the last prototype so they fully understand the design, the assembly method, etc., etc. Also, probably, a very experienced engineer to look at the design aspects and the manufacturing aspects and try to think of what can go wrong is a very good thing. And again, if you want to do that in a structured manner, then it calls for a process FMEA. So we talked about design FMEA earlier, which is just about, okay, design of the product itself carries some issues. What is it? And then in the process FMEA, you already plan, okay, so these parts will be made this way. Okay, what are the kind of typical risks? And then the assembly is going to be like this and whatever. What can go wrong? How are they going to fit these wires? And what if the wires are too long? What if the wires are too short? What if there's going to be like 5 wires? We color code them, but what if the operator by mistake plugs the red into where the black should go? Oh, okay, then we have a problem. Are we going to be able to detect it? Well, do we have some kind of functional test that will look into that later in the process? If yes, then it's not that bad as long as you can easily rework the few products that would have had that issue. But if you can rework, wow, it might be very costly, right? And then if you do not have some kind of test after the operation that can catch very reliably the kind of issues that you have in mind, well, then you need to take it a bit more seriously. So these are the kind of questions that the process FMEA form usually takes you through. And then again, priority list of issues, so you can work together with the manufacturer to address those, and it leads into an action plan, which is a good thing. Which is a good thing, especially in China, when you have the priority. Okay, these topics, this is very high priority. We need that addressed now, and then this is the whatever high priority. Let's talk about it next week, etc. And then you have, okay, this is the to-do list. We all agree on that, and let's track who's going to do what. That's great. That's how you mitigate the potential issues.
Good. So that is really, once again, why do you need to think about doing these design reviews? And of course, we covered introducing them and talking about when as well, and some of the different scenarios. So that's a good one, Renaud. I think it's time to wrap up, but you've mentioned some of the different design for approaches. And so I mentioned earlier that we will leave links in the show notes as usual. And to anybody listening, if you found this useful, please do give us a 5-star rating.
Yeah, always enjoy it. All right. Thanks, Adrian.
Thanks again for listening to this podcast brought to you by the Sofeast Group. We're on a mission to provide you with everything you need to manufacture effectively in Asia, including inspections, auditing, new product development support, contract manufacturing, 3PL warehousing and fulfillment, and much, much more across Asia's key manufacturing areas. Visit us at sofeast.com, that's SOFEAST.com, to learn more and get help. If you've enjoyed the podcast today, please do rate, review and share, because it will really help others discover us too.